This is Unit 5, Lesson 6, Part 2, mole-to-mole calculations, and students will be able to calculate mole-to-mole calculations, that's a little redundant, from a given quantity and a balanced chemical reaction. The vocabulary term is the same from last lesson, but it's just so important I put it again, which is mole ratio. So from the last lesson, we learned to interpret this reaction by saying to ourselves that when 2 moles of hydrogen gas reacts with 1 mole of oxygen gas, it will produce 2 moles of H2O. Okay, you should be able to say that to yourself when you read the equation. So what if I am posed with this question? How many moles of water will be produced if 5 moles of oxygen gas react? So I don't immediately know the answer to that, but what I do know is that for every 1 mole of O2, I will make 2 moles of H2O, right? That's what the balanced equation tells me. And we learned that we should actually write it like this, okay, as a fraction, and saying those 2 amounts are equal. So I need to keep this ratio intact, okay? I always need to have twice as many waters as oxygens, but it's telling me that I'm actually starting with 5 moles of oxygen gas. Okay, so some of you in your head might say, well, if I just need double the amount, right? This ratio tells me that means I need double the amount of water. That means I have 10 moles of water. And you're absolutely correct, but we need to learn how to set up this conversion correctly. All right, so we went over this a lot in class, and here's the golden rule. Moles of O2 is technically a numerator, right? Because I can put it over 1, and 5 divided by 1 is still 5. So this is a numerator. And if I want this unit to cancel out, which I do, because I'm trying to convert it into moles of water, it has to go on the bottom next. Okay, so without fail, the unit, which is moles, and the substance that I write here has to go here next. I don't care what the situation is. If you're doing a conversion, that must be true. Notice I do not take the number down, just moles of O2. Okay? That literally causes the moles of O2 to cancel out, and I have to put the unit that I want to get to on top. And the problem is asking me for water, so that's what I put on top. And therefore, because it's the only thing that's not canceled out, it has to be what my answer is in. So notice I'm filling in the units and the substances before I fill in the quantities. Now, I just have to look to the coefficients to fill in these numbers. And I wrote it right here. Okay? Of course, I had to flip it, but there's 2 moles of water for every 1 mole of O2. Okay? And now it's just simple math here. Don't get overwhelmed. Okay? PEMDAS says, what do I do first? Parentheses. So go 2 divided by 1, and you hopefully tell me that's 2. And then multiply by outside the parentheses, right? 5 times 2 is 10. Okay? And that was our intuitive answer, right? When we knew that the amount of water had to be double the amount of oxygen. But here is what we call the conversion for how you set it up. All right, we're going to try a problem here. So here's that same reaction from the last lesson. And it's asking how many moles of sulfur, which is right here, must react to produce 4 moles of iron 2 sulfide. All right, so if you can, I want you to pause me and try this problem. If you know that you can't, I will give you a little bit more help. All right, so here we go. All right, so I'm starting with 4 moles of iron. Sorry, I didn't even finish. Iron 2 sulfide. Okay, Now, the first thought that you should have is what goes on the bottom next. If your first thought was a number, stop. You can't think of numbers first. You'll have such a hard time. What unit and substance go on the bottom because we want them to cancel out? If your thought was moles of FeS, good job. By doing that, they cancel out. Okay, that's the rule. And so what goes on top? It's what we're trying to get to. So what is the problem asking you to find? Moles of sulfur, so let's put that on top. Moles of sulfur. And now what numbers go in the mole ratio? Remember, this was our last lesson. Look at the balanced equation, there's your first hint, and tell me how many moles of each of those substances we have. Okay, find FeS, point to it in the equation. How many moles do I have? Hopefully you said 8. And then how many moles of S sulfur do I have? S8. Good, 1. Okay. So again, just conceptually, I hope you're seeing this is the ratio that the balanced equation says we must keep. Okay, but we're not starting with 8 of these, we're actually starting with 4. Okay? So this setup helps us figure out the actual answer. So again, now go ahead and solve. PEMDAS says do what first? Yes, parentheses. 1 divided by 8. So go ahead and do that. And then you want to multiply that by 4. Okay, it's actually important that you practice putting this in your calculator because a lot of times I see kids being able to set it up correctly, but then they can't actually put it in their calculator. So this ends up being, I hope you got 0.5, and that's a quantity. You always need a unit. 0.5 what? Moles of what? S8, right? Because we canceled out the moles of FeS. The only thing we're left of is that. Okay? If you did not make a note to yourself about this, then you should. Make sure that your first thought is the units and the substance, not the numbers. The numbers you fill in last. All right, and I think that is it for this lesson. Go on to the next one.